In the hallowed halls of Congress, where words are weighed like gold and history echoes off the marble walls, a moment of profound disrespect can shatter the chamber's fragile decorum. Under the cold, impartial glare of the lights, Senator Marsha Blackburn leaned into her microphone. A thin, dismissive smile played on her lips as her voice, dripping with condescension, cut through the air. "I appreciate the representative's passion," she began, directing her words across the dais. "But these are complex legal and constitutional matters. Perhaps a bit more preparation and a little less performance would help her grasp the nuances we're discussing here today." The insult landed. A collective, silent gasp seemed to suck the air out of the room. A staffer froze, his pen hovering over a notepad. All cameras, all eyes, swiveled to one person, Representative Jasmine Crockett. She did not flinch. She did not scowl. She sat perfectly still, a mask of quiet composure on her face. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, remained fixed on Blackburn, betraying nothing but a deep, unshakable calm. In that deafening silence, her stillness was a show of immense strength, a silent promise of a reckoning to come. The room held its breath, waiting for the explosion. It never came. Instead, there was only the quiet dignity of a woman who refused to be broken, who knew that the fight wasn't about to be won by raising her voice, but by sharpening her mind. This attack wasn't just an insult. It was a grave miscalculation. And to understand the true magnitude of that error, you must first understand the battle that led them to this very moment. The confrontation did not erupt from a vacuum. It was the flashpoint of a battle that had been simmering for hours inside the formidable chamber of the House Oversight Committee. The topic of the day was not trivial. It was a firestorm at the heart of American democracy, the crisis of ethics and accountability on the nation's Supreme Court. This wasn't just another hearing. It was a battleground for the very soul of justice, a place where the foundational principle that no one is above the law was being tested in real time. The stakes were monumental, reaching far beyond the Beltway to touch the life of every American who still believed that the scales of justice should be balanced, not bought. On one side of this ideological war sat the established guard, represented by figures like Marsha Blackburn, a seasoned conservative stalwart, a fierce defender of the institutions she believed were under attack from a new, progressive vanguard. On the other side was that vanguard itself. And among its sharpest voices was Jasmine Crockett, a freshman lawmaker whose reputation as a brilliant and relentless questioner was already echoing through the halls of the Capitol. For hours, the hearing had been a grueling war of attrition. Legal jargon became ammunition. Precedent was wielded like a shield. Each side volleyed thinly veiled accusations and barbed inquiries, searching for a weakness in the other's armor. The tension was a thick, palpable entity in the room, growing with every tick of the clock. Crockett, with her background as a civil rights attorney, had been methodically dismantling the arguments of the witnesses defending the status quo, her questions precise, her logic inescapable. It was a masterful performance of intellectual dominance, and it was clearly beginning to fray the nerves of her opponents. The pressure had to break somewhere. It finally did when Blackburn, seeing the narrative slipping away, decided to stop attacking the argument and instead attack the arguer. Her insult was a desperate gambit, a tactical decision to change the terms of the debate from law and ethics to personality and perceived intelligence. But this comment wasn't just a strategic jab in a heated moment. It was a window into a political philosophy, a tactic honed over a long and controversial career, built on a foundation of unyielding confrontation. That foundation of confrontation was not built by accident. It was the cornerstone of Marsha Blackburn's political identity from the very beginning. Her ascent in the world of conservative politics was powered by a specific brand of unyielding, populist certainty. She cultivated a persona not of a legislator seeking compromise, but of a warrior standing guard against the erosion of traditional values. To her supporters, she was a bulwark of conviction. To her detractors, she was a master of obstruction, a politician who saw nuance not as a sign of intellectual rigor, but as a symptom of moral weakness. Her career is a long and storied highlight reel of this philosophy in action. In hearing after hearing, a familiar pattern would emerge. An expert witness, a celebrated academic, or a rival lawmaker would present a detailed, evidence-based argument, only to be met with a dismissive wave of the hand and a sharp, camera-ready soundbite that ignored the substance entirely. She spoke not to persuade, but to dominate, not to debate, but to declare. There was the infamous hearing on internet privacy where she lectured a room full of Silicon Valley's top engineers on the fundamentals of their own technology. There were the countless interviews where complex geopolitical crises were reduced to simplistic, bumper sticker slogans. This wasn't a lack of intelligence, it was a strategic choice. Her political power was derived from the projection of absolute, unshakable confidence. She understood that in the theater of modern politics, the appearance of strength often mattered more than the strength of one's argument. Over time, this tactic hardened into a kind of political armor. She became insulated by her own certainty, surrounded by a media ecosystem that rewarded her for every jab, every interruption, every condescending chuckle. But with this great confidence came a great and fatal flaw: hubris. She grew accustomed to opponents who were either too intimidated by her aggression to fight back effectively, or who would get drawn into a messy, emotional brawl where she controlled the terms of engagement. She began to see every intellectual challenge not as a test of her own knowledge, but as an act of political disrespect to be punished. The same dismissiveness she had once aimed at tech CEOs and military generals was now being aimed at Jasmine Crockett. She saw a freshman lawmaker, a new face, and assumed the old tactics would work. She assumed the force of her personality could overwhelm the facts. She had built an entire career on this brand of intellectual intimidation, believing her opponents would either buckle or break. But standing opposite this storm of manufactured outrage was a figure forged in a completely different fire. Someone whose entire life had been a preparation for this very battle, a mind that arrogance could not shatter, and that mind was not forged in the polished halls of corporate boardrooms or the quiet comfort of inherited influence. It was forged in fire. It was sharpened in the trenches of the American justice system, in the chaotic, underfunded, and often heartbreaking world of public defense. Before Jasmine Crockett was a congresswoman, she was a warrior for the voiceless. 1. She made a conscious choice not to join a lucrative law firm, not to chase wealth and prestige, but to stand in the gap for the accused, the forgotten, and the people all too often crushed by the sheer weight of a system that was not designed to see them. Imagine those courtrooms. The fluorescent lights humming over worn-out floors, the air thick with desperation and quiet fear. Day after day, she stood against prosecutors with limitless resources, before judges who had heard every excuse, representing clients the world had already condemned. In that crucible, she learned that outrage was a luxury. Shouting was a sign of weakness. In a world where she was consistently underestimated, where her passion was mislabeled as aggression and her youth as inexperience, she discovered her true weapons: meticulous preparation and an unshakable, icy calm. She learned that the loudest voice in the room rarely wins the day. Victory belonged to the most prepared, the most precise, the one who knew the law, the facts, and the case file better than anyone else in the room. Her composure under fire wasn't a personality trait. It was a survival mechanism honed over thousands of hours of battle. This was more than just a job. It was a reflection of her journey as a black woman in America. She knew, in her very bones, what it felt like to walk into a room and have your intelligence immediately questioned, to have your credentials dismissed, to know you had to be twice as good, twice as prepared, just to be considered equal. Every condescending question from a judge, every dismissive remark from an opposing counsel, was another layer of armor. She wasn't just defending her clients, she was defending her own right and the right of everyone who looked like her. to stand on equal footing in the halls of justice. So when she decided to run for office, it wasn't a career change, it was an escalation. It was a decision to take the same fight, the same principles, from the county courthouse to the United States Congress. She brought the same tireless work ethic and sharp legal mind that had served her clients so well to the legislative arena, quickly earning a reputation as a formidable and fearless advocate for her constituents. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there to make a difference, using the same tools she had always used: facts, logic, and an encyclopedic knowledge of the issues at hand. So when Senator Marsha Blackburn delivered her insult, she wasn't just attacking a politician. She was attacking a lifetime of fighting uphill battles. She was attacking a woman who had stood firm for the powerless against the powerful. A warrior who had faced down far more intimidating figures than a condescending senator. And as the committee chairman finally yielded the floor to Representative Crockett, the air in the room grew thick with an unspoken truth that only a few seemed to grasp. This wasn't going to be a political rebuttal. It was going to be a masterclass. The room was a pressure cooker, the silence electric with anticipation. The masterclass began not with a thunderclap, but with a quiet, deliberate grace. Representative Crockett offered a respectful nod to the chairman, calmly adjusted the microphone, and took a slow, measured sip of water. Each small gesture was a testament to her absolute control, a stark contrast to the venomous attack she had just endured. Across the dais, Marsha Blackburn watched this display and misinterpreted it completely. She saw hesitation. She saw weakness. She saw a rookie lawmaker unsure of how to respond. A confident smirk returned to her face as she leaned back in her chair, believing her opponent was neutered, the point already won. Crockett began, her voice even and steady, initially ignoring the insult and instead addressing the witness with a precise question about judicial precedent. Before the witness could even answer, Blackburn interjected, her voice sharp. "Mr. Chairman, if the representative is quite finished, perhaps we could move on to members who have a firmer grasp on the subject." Crockett didn't even turn her head. "The senator is out of order," she stated simply, her eyes still locked on the witness, "and I will not be interrupted. I have the floor." This calm defiance seemed to ignite something in Blackburn. The smirk vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped frown. Over the next several minutes, a stunning dynamic unfolded. Crockett proceeded with her questioning, each query a surgeon's scalpel, methodically slicing away at the weak points in the opposition's testimony. Her demeanor never wavered. She was a picture of stoic professionalism, her focus absolute. Blackburn, however, began to unravel. Unable to sit in silence, she interrupted again, this time with a louder, more agitated tone, questioning the premise of Crockett's inquiry. Crockett paused, allowed the interruption to hang in the air for a beat, and then calmly dismantled the senator's point with a single, fact-based sentence before returning to the witness. This became the pattern. Crockett would build a logical framework, and Blackburn, growing visibly flustered, would try to knock it down with emotional, increasingly personal interjections. The more composed Crockett became, the more erratic Blackburn appeared. She was no longer a seasoned senator. She was a heckler, losing control of the room and herself. Crockett was giving her every opportunity to self-destruct, and Blackburn was seizing each one with reckless abandon. The tension in the chamber was now almost unbearable, a tightly wound coil ready to snap. Having patiently absorbed every interruption and every sneer, Crockett saw her moment. She finished her questions for the witness, thanked him, and then paused, letting the senator's last agitated words echo in the silence. Then, with the calm of a grandmaster about to declare checkmate, she turned her full attention, for the first time, directly to Marsha Blackburn. The villain, who had been leaning forward in agitation, had no idea she had just walked into a masterfully laid legal trap. The air in the chamber was thin, sharp. Every person in the room, from the most senior member to the youngest intern, seemed to be holding their breath. Jasmine Crockett's gaze was locked on Marsha Blackburn, and for the first time, the senator's unshakable confidence seemed to flicker. "Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her voice quiet, yet carrying to every corner of the room. "Before I yield, I believe it is not only my right, but my duty, to respond to the repeated ad hominem attacks made by the senator from Tennessee, specifically her commentary regarding my preparation." She let the last word hang in the air, dripping with a cold, refined irony. "The senator seems to believe I am unfamiliar with the complexities of this issue, so allow me to be of assistance." Crockett reached for a thick binder on her desk, opening it with a quiet efficiency that spoke of countless hours of work. She spoke of constitutional nuance. Perhaps she is referring to the precedent set in Marbury v. Madison, which I'm sure she knows established the principle of judicial review, a principle directly threatened by the ethics crisis we are discussing. Or maybe she was thinking of the discussions around Federalist Paper No. 78, where Hamilton himself described the judiciary as having neither force nor will, but merely judgment. A judgment that is now, quite frankly, for sale. As she spoke, Blackburn's face began to change. The tight-lipped frown gave way to a look of genuine shock. Her aides began shuffling papers, whispering frantically, searching for a rebuttal that did not exist. Crockett wasn't finished. The senator also mentioned the importance of reading the briefing materials. I agree, which is why I was so fascinated by page 87 of the special counsel's report, the one submitted last Tuesday, which details the very conflicts of interest this committee is tasked with investigating. And on page 92, it directly refutes the primary defense our witness has offered here today. It seems, perhaps it is the senator who has not done the reading. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. This was no longer a defense. It was a clinical counteroffensive. "And while we are on the subject of preparation and complex legal matters," Crockett continued, her voice gaining a new, sharper edge, "I found myself reviewing the senator's own legislative record on judicial ethics. It is illuminating. In 2021, the senator voted against the very transparency bill that would have prevented this current crisis. She called it, at the time, a solution in search of a problem. And yet today, she positions herself as a defender of the court's integrity. This isn't a principled stand. It is a profound and public contradiction." The blood drained from Blackburn's face. She was trapped, exposed, dismantled on live television not by shouting or anger, but by her own record, wielded against her with surgical precision. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could she say? The facts were cold, hard, and inescapable. Crockett paused, letting the weight of the hypocrisy settle over the room. She looked from Blackburn to the chairman, then to the cameras, her audience now the entire American public. "This pattern of condescension," she said, her voice now filled with a powerful, righteous authority, "is not just about me. It is a tactic used to silence, to dismiss, and to intimidate anyone who dares to challenge the comfortable status quo. It is particularly reserved for women, and most especially for women of color, who enter these halls expecting to be met with respect, but are instead met with suspicion about our intelligence, our qualifications, and our right to even be here." She turned her gaze back to the now silent senator one last time. "So, let me be unequivocally clear for the senator and anyone else who is confused. I am prepared, I am qualified, and I am not going anywhere. The fundamental question before this committee, and indeed before this country, is not whether I have done my homework. The question is whether this body is finally prepared to face the truth." Her final word landed. And then, nothing. Not a gavel, not a cough, not a whisper. Just a profound, echoing silence. A silence that was both an admission of defeat and a testament to the devastating power of a truth expertly told. The point didn't just land, it detonated. And in the stunned silence of that committee room, Phones were already lighting up beneath the tables. The battle on the floor was over. The shockwaves were just beginning to spread. Before the chairman's gavel had even officially adjourned the hearing, the shockwaves hit the digital world with the force of a tidal wave. The initial clip, likely posted by a lone C-SPAN viewer, was just a spark. But within minutes, it hit the accelerant of social media and became an inferno. It didn't just go viral, it went supernova. On X, formerly Twitter, the video multiplied at a dizzying pace, each share adding a new layer of commentary, outrage, and awe. On TikTok, younger users created split-screen edits, pairing Blackburn's condescending insult with Crockett's devastating beat-by-beat rebuttal set to dramatic, triumphant music. The hashtags began to trend nationally. #Jasmine Crockett was #1, followed closely by #AlwaysPrepared, and the slightly more pointed #Blackburn Gets Schooled. The Internet, in its chaotic and immediate way, was delivering its verdict. Tweets and posts flooded the timeline, forming a global chorus of validation. From a law professor in California: "As a legal scholar, let me be clear. This was not a political comeback. This was a flawless cross-examination of a hostile witness, executed live on C-SPAN. Flawless." From a young activist in Chicago: "To every black woman who has ever been told to calm down or had her intelligence questioned in a meeting, watch this. This one is for us." Memes were already spreading like wildfire. Blackburn's stunned face became an instant reaction image, captioned with things like, "My face when I find out the person I insulted actually did the reading." Within the hour, the wave crashed into the mainstream media. CNN's Chiron blared. Crockett's calm rebuttal leaves Senator speechless. On MSNBC, a panel of commentators was almost giddy. One declared, "What we witnessed today was not just a debate. It was a transfer of energy. We saw an old guard, reliant on bluster and condescension, run headfirst into the brick wall of a new generation that came with the receipts." Even more traditional outlets framed it as a significant cultural moment. The New York Times headline read, "In tense hearing, Representative Crockett's methodical takedown signals a shift in political discourse." The clip transcended the political bubble. Celebrities, authors, athletes, and actors shared it with their millions of followers, often with simple captions like, "This is leadership," or "Speechless." A cultural moment had been forged in the fires of that committee room. It was a story with a clear hero, a clear villain, and a deeply satisfying conclusion that millions of people felt on a personal, visceral level. The viral storm was a clear and decisive public verdict. The Internet had crowned a new queen of the comeback. But for Jasmine Crockett, the woman at the center of it all, this moment was about something much bigger than a single celebrated victory. It was about turning a personal attack into a timeless lesson for the entire nation. Days later, after the digital storm had begun to settle into a steady rain of praise, the woman at the center of it all sat down for an interview. The setting was no longer a battlefield but a quiet studio, and her purpose was not to gloat or relive the fight, but to elegantly reframe it. The music, once tense and dramatic, now shifts to a warm, inspirational score. She explained that the viral moment, as satisfying as it was for millions, was never the goal. "The senator's comments weren't really about me," she said, her voice calm and reflective. "I was just a proxy. That attack was for every person who has ever walked into a room and been judged on sight. It was for every woman who has been talked over in a meeting, for every Black American who has had their intelligence questioned, for every young person who has been told they need to wait their turn to lead." In her telling, the confrontation was transformed. It was no longer a personal spat between two politicians, but a profound and public test of American values. It became a lesson in the timeless struggle between two opposing forces: the force of arrogance, which seeks to diminish, and the force of dignity, which seeks to build. "My response," she continued, her words carrying the weight of a life's philosophy, was never about landing a clever punch. It was about drawing a clear line in the sand, a line that says our dignity is non-negotiable, a line that says in the halls of power, truth is not a partisan opinion. It is the bedrock of our work. It's about reminding everyone watching that our service to this country is not measured by the volume of our voice or the condescension of our opponents, but by the quiet, relentless work we do when the cameras are off. That is the only metric that has ever mattered. The music swells here, as her words become a universal call to action, a source of strength for anyone who has ever felt underestimated. She leans forward, her eyes connecting with the audience through the lens, speaking not as a politician, but as a fellow traveler. Don't ever let anyone's insult become your definition. Let your preparation be your armor, and let your truth be your sword. If you do that, you will find a strength they can never take from you. That is a battle you will win, every single time. In the end, a calculated insult, designed to diminish and silence, was met with a response so powerful it left a room, and then a nation, completely speechless. It was a story that proved, in stunning fashion, that arrogance is no match for preparation. That, in the face of profound disrespect, dignity is a shield, and intelligence is a sword. It's a timeless reminder that true power isn't found in the volume of an attack, but in the quiet confidence of those who have done the work and stand firmly in their truth. This was more than a viral clip. It was a lesson in strength, a blueprint for how to meet aggression not with equal fire, but with a superior mind and an unbreakable character. If you believe that poise, preparation, and dignity are the ultimate weapons in the arena of ideas, then subscribe to this channel. Become part of a community that is dedicated to celebrating substance over slander and truth over empty talking points. Share this video, not just to show a political victory, but to spread the powerful message at its core, that your value is not determined by the judgment of others, but by your own commitment to excellence. Let's be the voice that stands for brilliance, for bravery, and for the unshakable power of being prepared.